and share our contemplations of the beauty of the universe. In the eyes of the Albanian communist government, my father had a bad biography. His family had been landowners for generations in pre-communist times, and because of this, they were continuously persecuted. My grandmother did not see her brothers until 1991. One of them was in jail for nearly 50 years. Several other relatives were forced into camps, shot, or exiled. My dad's first cousin, an engineer who was part of the project to drain the swamps in Albania after World War II, was taken from his home in the 1970s, shot dead, and carted off. 2 decades later, his family found his body at the medical school in the capital city, Tirana, where it was perfectly preserved in formaldehyde and being used to teach anatomy. By then, the dead man's brothers and cousins were in their 70s, but the corpse they found remained the image of its 30-something self. The man finally received a proper burial in 1997. My dad fared better than his cousin. He was temporarily exiled. This happened several times over the course of my childhood. His first exile occurred when I was 5 years old and was triggered by a letter. At the time, my father was a professor of econometrics at the University of Tirana. He had been working on a difficult mathematical problem that had important applications from economy to astronomy. It involved the inverse of very big and very sparse matrices, which resemble massive spreadsheets with hundreds of rows and columns, but where most of the entries are zero. This work earned him an invitation from the University of Oxford in Great Britain. He was offered a 6-month sabbatical to discuss his new algorithm. But the letter never reached him. It was intercepted by the Albanian government. Instead of visiting Oxford, my father began his exile at the start of the academic year, my first day of school. That morning, he took me to school in my new uniform, holding flowers for the teacher, as if all was well. But because I had overheard my parents' whispered conversations, I knew he would not be collecting me from school that afternoon, or for many days after. Nevertheless, I pretended to be excited, so that the hopelessness I felt would not be the last image of me my father took with him to exile. My mother and I had already lived through much drama in the previous months, a dark time during which my father underwent a process that was euphemistically called an ideological debate, but that was in fact a trial that would decide his fate and punishment. In those days, there were no defense attorneys or real trials in Albania. The purpose of the debate was to have fellow professors and university employees demonstrate to my father that receiving an invitation from Oxford meant he had erred ideologically, and as a result, he needed to be punished and rehabilitated. This sham went on every day for 2 weeks, often until midnight. At the end of the debate, a decision would be made on his punishment, which could be anything from jail to exile to the death penalty. We didn't know how long the debate would last or what decision would be made. My mother and I waited every night with the lights switched off and our faces pressed against the window, hoping to hear my father's footsteps before the next tick of the wall clock. We were not allowed to openly show affection to someone who was under investigation by the party. But the memory of the terror we experienced before we finally heard the sound of his footsteps and felt the warmth of his embrace after he closed the front door continues to chill me to my core. On that first day of school, kids gathered in the schoolyard. One by one, their names were called, and they were sent to smaller groups and introduced to their teachers. My new teacher's name was Shpresa, which means hope in Albanian. I pretended to talk with the other kids after I handed the flowers to my teacher, but I was following my father out of the corner of my eye as he slowly receded from the school fence. I did not dare turn my head. I remember his look of loss and profound melancholy as he glanced back one more time before rounding the corner and vanishing. I did not know when or if I would see him again. Eventually, my father was allowed to return home for 1 weekend a month. Finally, after 2 years, the government realized they needed his expertise again, so he was released and reinstated at the Academy of Science. It was during his brief visits that he taught me some of his most enduring lessons, late-night wisdom that I would carry with me on my own journey through the darkness. In those days, Radio Tirana would broadcast an hour-long classical music program at 11 p.m. each Saturday.